Here's something odd. We can't stop talking about boomers and millennials. We pick apart Gen Z like there's some brand new species under a microscope. But there's a whole generation sitting quietly in between, rarely discussed, almost invisible. Generation X, roughly born between 1965 and 1980. They're the coworkers who never complain, the parents who seem strangely distant sometimes, the people who literally built the internet but wouldn't dream of posting about their morning coffee. And here's the part nobody mentions. Their psychology might be the least understood of any generation alive today.
They were the first generation to experience being latchkey kids on a massive scale. Picture it. The year is 1978. You're 8 years old, and you walk into an empty house because both your parents are at work. No smartphone, no doorbell camera, no way for anyone to check in on you. You unlock the door yourself, fix your own snack, do your homework solo, and just wait. A study in the American Journal of Orthopsychiatry found that by 1984, roughly 7 million kids between ages 5 and 13 were routinely left unsupervised after school. That's an entire generation absorbing the lesson that you can't always rely on someone showing up. That empty house taught them more than independence. It hammered home the idea that actions carry real weight, consequences you can't talk your way out of. When their parents finally got home, you always knew exactly where you stood. Rules landed fast and hard. Nobody wanted to sit down and process your feelings. Cross a line, and you paid for it immediately.
Psychologically speaking, this built what researchers term a high-contingency environment, where cause and effect were linked with no cushion in between. Their brains adapted to predict outcomes instantly, which explains why Gen Xers tend to think several moves ahead in a way that confuses younger generations. Gen X watched their parents preach stability while divorce rates climbed through the 70s and 80s. They saw people pour everything into a company, only to get handed a pink slip the moment layoffs came around. Everyone kept telling them, work hard, play by the rules, and everything falls into place. Then the rules kept shifting right in front of their eyes. So sure, a psychologist might label it defensive pessimism, but Gen X just calls it staying realistic. It's not cynicism exactly, it's more like a suit of emotional armor. They hope for the best, but brace for the worst. Because honestly, the worst kept happening.
That's part of why you barely see them on social media. They grew up when privacy was simply the default. Mess up as a kid, and maybe a few people found out. That was the end of it. No phones, no viral clips, just some cringy memories tucked away in a garage or parking lot. Broadcasting your life to strangers doesn't feel thrilling to them. It feels dangerous. It's not that they don't understand the technology. They learned early that the less people know, the safer you are. Gen X turns sarcasm into armor. Make the joke first. Keep people at a distance. Laugh before it can sting. And you can trace that straight back to growing up under the shadow of the Cold War, when teachers discussed nuclear annihilation like it was just another item on the schedule. Duck and cover drills, as if a wooden desk would save anyone. When grown-ups act like the world might end tomorrow, but also tell you not to worry about it, you get comfortable holding two contradictory ideas at once, and you learn to keep some emotional distance, just in case.
Here's the fascinating part, though. Despite all of this, Gen X built a distinct relationship with work that still stands apart today. They don't announce it, they don't post about it online, they simply do it. That ethic was forged through jobs that sound almost ancient now. 5 a.m. paper routes, bagging groceries, running a fast food register, and calculating change by hand when the machine broke. These weren't resume padding. They were blunt introductions to adulthood, where a 12-year-old was trusted to deliver news to an entire neighborhood every morning. They watched their parents' generation get wrecked by corporate downsizing, so they never bought into company loyalty, but they're fiercely devoted to their own competence. They can't control whether they get laid off, but they can control whether they're the most valuable person in the room when it happens.
There's a strange contradiction sitting at the center of Gen X psychology. They're simultaneously the most self-sufficient generation and quietly one of the most collaborative. They won't ask for help. They've been figuring things out alone since they were 8 years old. But if you need help, they'll show up without fanfare, without posting about it afterward. That comes from forming tight-knit friendships out of pure necessity, back when the adults weren't around. And then there's their relationship with authority, which is complicated. They respect competence, not job titles. Earn your position through real skill, and they'll follow you anywhere. Show up with a fancy title and no idea what you're doing, and they'll have zero patience for you. Gen X questions authority because they spent their childhood watching incompetent leaders make disastrous calls. Watergate, Iran-Contra, the botched response to the AIDS crisis. They also hit serious economic turbulence their parents never faced. The youngest of them graduated straight into the dot-com crash. The oldest were hitting their professional peak right as the 2008 financial crisis landed. Having been burned economically more than once, they're more likely to juggle multiple income streams, not out of some entrepreneurial spirit, but because they learned the hard way that nothing is permanent.
Gen X also tends to show a pattern some researchers describe as self-reliance, bordering on anxiety. They're remarkably good in a crisis, but that competence often comes paired with a reluctance to lean on anyone else. Research published in the Journal of Adult Development shows Gen Xers report lower rates of seeking social support during stressful stretches, not because they lack people to turn to, but because asking can feel like admitting defeat. That same self-reliance shaped how they processed information. Before the internet, knowledge came with a cost. Gen X spent hours combing through library card catalogs, hunting for one book that might have the answer. Information demanded effort and time, and because of that, what they learned stuck differently. Cognitive psychologists call this deeper encoding. Information gained through effort tends to lodge more permanently in memory. They learned to fix things with their own hands, because that's simply what you did when a bike chain slipped or the television started flickering. You didn't call a repair technician. You flipped the bike over, got your hands greasy, and worked it out. That built a kind of mechanical instinct, a quiet belief that with enough patience and the right screwdriver, you could take on the physical world yourself.
Now, they're raising kids in an entirely different world, one full of helicopter parenting, constant supervision, and social media capturing every moment. They gave their children the attention they themselves never got. But sometimes they worry they've raised kids who are too soft, too dependent, too exposed. Because in the Gen X worldview, being visible is the same thing as being vulnerable. The truth is, Generation X might be the last generation that genuinely knows what it means to sit alone with your own thoughts, to be bored, to solve a problem without typing it into a search bar. They're not better than any other generation, just shaped differently, molded by a singular moment in history, when the old world was fading and the new one hadn't fully arrived yet. They're the bridge generation, and bridges don't get much attention. They just stand there, holding everything together, expecting nothing back.